David and I were reborn together. But he doesn't know. He thinks I am still that love-obsessed fool from my previous life. I provided him with the best material conditions, sent him to the best university, even drove my family, the Williams family, into bankruptcy to support his business ventures. In the end, after he drained me of all my usefulness, he kicked me to the curb. As if that weren't enough, he brought Lily, my nemesis, right to me and said, "Finally, I don't have to endure the humiliation from your money anymore." Back in this life, I vowed never to give him another dime. During the selection for a one-on-one sponsorship recipient, David stood before me, haughty and confident. But I deliberately passed him over and chose the pitiful kid next to him instead. For the annual charity donation event, I attended on behalf of the Williams family. To emphasize the importance of sponsorship, each year we picked one individual from among the funded candidates for a direct one-on-one partnership with our team. In my previous life, I had singled out David from that crowd at first sight. Too bad he turned out to be an ungrateful wretch. This time, before the event, I specifically invited Lily. She was my nemesis and David's first love. David had repeatedly mentioned to me that Lily had been secretly in love with him long before my sponsorship came along, and that my money had blocked their romance. Now I wanted to see whether Lily had ever truly noticed him before he became my boyfriend. When Lily and I arrived at the donation hall, everyone involved was already present. Hundreds of people crowded the space, standing shoulder to shoulder. My gaze immediately landed on David. Admittedly, purely in terms of aesthetics, my taste wasn't bad. Over 6 feet tall, slim build, snow-white skin amid all the earnest, disadvantaged students, he stood out like a lone crane in a field of sparrows. Sensing my stare, David straightened up even more, raising his chin higher. I knew he had been reborn too. From someone worth billions to a broke student again, I wondered if he'd grown accustomed to it yet. And with me, his most despised enemy, about to deliver this humiliation, I was curious how he'd react. I walked in with great enthusiasm. The school representatives greeted me warmly, thanking the Williams family nonstop for giving impoverished students a chance to study without worry. See? Even bystanders knew gratitude. But because I had feelings for David, he saw all my efforts as an insult. This time, I decided to withdraw that affection. Hope it satisfied him. I modestly brushed it off, saying we were just fulfilling our corporate social responsibility. Then we moved to the next phase. The school officials had done a first round of screening based on grades, awards, and other metrics, narrowing it down to 10 candidates. I had to pick one of them for the one-on-one sponsorship. Seated at the conference table, I watched as the person in charge lined up the candidates. They took turns stepping forward to introduce themselves in order. They were all exceptional students, hindered only by material constraints from reaching their full potential. Our sponsorship aimed to provide them a boat to cross that first river blocking their paths. As they spoke, their eyes showed both appreciation and eagerness. Everyone knew the one-on-one pick got more resources, a shot at a broader future. Soon, it was David's turn. He truly was impressive, consistently ranking in the top 10 academically and winning provincial and national awards. The person in charge was high on him and asked David to say a few extra words to make a stronger impression on me. But David didn't oblige. He just coldly said, "Hello." The official's face darkened, but David was utterly indifferent. He stared back at me with utter arrogance and disdain. In my past life, I had skipped over the remaining candidates right after David's introduction and named him my pick. He surely expected the same this time. What a pity. I turned to look at the person in charge. "No problem," I said. "Let's meet the next student." David paused for a moment, not leaving immediately. The person in charge immediately urged, "David, Please don't waste time. David glanced at me coldly, then turned and left. You see, if I hadn't chosen you, you wouldn't even be qualified to stand before me. I couldn't be bothered to spare him a glance and continued listening to the next candidate's profile. After hearing them all, I chose Chris. He hadn't won any awards, but he was consistently top in academics. Moreover, he was the only one with a bruise on his face. It was said it came from his drunken father. He didn't seem to have much hope until I announced he was chosen. Only then did he look at me with those listless eyes and say, "Thank you." David disagreed, sneering. A nerd who only knows how to study. Chris pursed his lips and didn't speak. But I wasn't going to indulge him anymore. This candidate. Are you verbally bullying your classmate? I said coldly. David first looked at me in surprise, then showed a subtle expression as if saying, "So that's it, you just want to get my attention." I almost vomited from disgust. David became even more calm and aloof. "I'm just telling the truth. In other words, you don't think your behavior is wrong?" Not wanting to discuss it with him, I turned directly to the school representative. "Is this the candidate you screened? I have serious doubts about the beneficiary's character. I want to fund someone who can pass this kindness forward. A future elite. But this student treats his classmates with arrogance and mocking. I question whether he would help the vulnerable when he has the ability." I deliberately framed him and elevated the stakes. Given a second chance, I didn't want to waste kindness on such an ungrateful person. Sure enough, my words made the school side very attentive. The person in charge quickly stepped in, demanding David apologize to Chris immediately or have his funding revoked. David looked at me furiously. I didn't even glance properly at him. "Didn't you say that my spending money on you was an insult to you? Well, I'll see whether David would beg me to insult him just for that bit of funding." "I won't apologize," David said firmly. "Don't think money can force me to submit. David, will show you all one day what it means not to underestimate a poor young man," David declared righteously. Everyone was dumbfounded. So not funding him means bullying him? What audacity! In the silence, clapping abruptly sounded. It was Lily. She walked over to me while applauding. "Such a strong-willed student. Emma, you shouldn't bully him." Lily spoke in a phony sweet tone while defending David, immediately trying to pin the blame on me for bullying a poor student. David's eyes lit up even more when he saw her. In his mind, he must have been imagining some touching scenario where his innocent crush stood up for him against all odds. Unfortunately, I recognized that sly glimmer of amusement at Lily's mouth. She just wanted to use David to annoy me. I'm not gonna be as stupid as before, letting her take all the credit with just a couple of words. But it was him who refused to apologize first. I deliberately looked at David with a contemptuous look. Sure enough, he raised his chin and glared at me. "I'm not wrong," he said. I pretended to sigh helplessly. Our Williams group will never sponsor a student who doesn't know how to unite with his classmates. But I changed the subject. "Since you think so highly of this classmate, Lily, why don't your Davis family sponsor him?" As soon as I finished speaking, David's eyes lit up and he looked at Lily expectantly. Lily stammered and looked embarrassed. Finally, she perfunctorily said, "I'll go back and discuss it with my family." Oh, come on. She's just an unimportant daughter from a side branch of the Davis family. There's no way she can get a positive result. But seeing David looking so smug, thinking that even if he loses my sponsorship, he still has Lily's, I silently decided to watch the show. I'm really looking forward to seeing how far David can go without the sponsorship from the Williams family. Emma and Chris entered the top-tier university, Jing University. David went to the normal university next to ours. He actually had the grades to get into Jing University. But the normal university offered subsidies, cheap accommodation and meals, and promised to give him a certain amount of monthly allowance. Emma and Chris were walking together when we ran into David. He looked Chris up and down with a flirtatious look and sneered disdainfully. Pretty boy. This also happened in my past life. At that time, I liked him and always appeared around him in various names. Gradually, there were rumors saying that he had hooked up with the eldest daughter of the Williams family and wouldn't have to worry about the rest of his life. Once, when I accompanied him to the cafeteria to get food, someone said right in front of him, "Gold digger." David's face darkened immediately. The person who said that walked away smugly. David turned around and overturned my plate, shouting at me to stay away from him in the future. The greasy food splashed on me, and all the classmates around were looking at me. I still remember that feeling of shame, wishing I could just disappear. I really regret not slapping him in the face right then. What a jerk. When others said something about him, he got angry. But when he became the one to say something, he mercilessly mocked the person in his former position. I was about to scold him when Chris stepped forward and stared straight into David's eyes. "You're jealous of me," he said in a very matter-of-fact tone, with a calmness that saw through everything. David took a step back and tried to stay calm. "What do I have to be jealous of you for?" Chris took another step forward. "You're jealous that I can get into Jing University and you can't. You're jealous that Emma chose me instead of you. You're jealous that it's me standing beside Emma, not you." Chris's series of attacks made me want to clap for him. David was obviously no match. After all, he couldn't say against his conscience that he went to the normal university because he looked down on Jing University. Finally, he could only leave with a "I'm too lazy to argue with you" and fled in a hurry. Only then did Chris put away his sharp edge and obediently stepped back beside me. "Aren't you angry?" I asked. "I know it's not true," Chris replied. "Good. At least the one selected this time is mentally sound. Unlike the last one, who became an ungrateful wretch after just a couple of gossips from others." I thought that after this incident, with David's proud self-esteem, he wouldn't bother me for a long time. I underestimated his ability to be flexible. I was reading in the library when he came over. "Emma, I'm giving you a chance to invest in my new energy company. As long as you come up with 50 million, I'll give you 0.1% of the company's original shares." David stood in front of my table, hands propped on the table, looking down at me from above. His eyes held 3 parts of mockery, 3 parts of coldness, 3 parts of indifference, and 1 part of charity. He was practically oozing alpha male vibes. But who in the world tries to attract investment in such an over-the-top way? I kicked the table leg and stood up, pushing the stool aside. "You're too close to me." David sprained his hand and staggered to stand properly. Good. Although he still exuded an air of dominance, at least it wasn't as suffocating as before. The students around who were reading were interrupted, and I was met with condemning looks. I apologized sincerely. "Sorry. This guy from another school is harassing me." I just couldn't hold it in. "Who do you say is harassing you?" David raised his voice. Immediately, a few tall and strong guys among the students stood up. David instantly wilted. "It's a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding." I said it was okay, and the guys sat back down. Only then did David lower his voice and threaten me through gritted teeth. "Emma, don't go too far." I shrugged, indicating that his threat was useless. David was furious, but he still had to be patient and negotiate with me. "Emma, think it over. If you don't invest in my company, don't blame me when the Williams family goes bankrupt. I didn't give you a chance." David looked down at me haughtily, like a high and mighty creator looking at the dolls in his cabinet. I suddenly understood what he meant. Right. In my past life, to support his startup, I forced my family to invest all the cash flow they had. Then, due to a broken capital chain, The Williams family almost went bankrupt. It was because his core technology made a breakthrough during that period that he managed to raise new funds, which helped the Williams family get through the crisis. No wonder he always looked so arrogant in front of me. He always regarded himself as the savior of the Williams family. But if we hadn't given him a large amount of cash, how could the Williams family have faced a broken capital chain? People like him, even after being reborn, only remember the results that are beneficial to themselves. The process doesn't matter at all. After understanding his way of thinking, I was even less likely to be polite to him. If you want to attract investment, do you have the company's qualifications? Do you have a team? Do you have a business plan? Do you have an investment return report? I fired off a series of questions, and David couldn't answer a single one. I looked at him scornfully. Coming to me for investment with nothing? What makes you think that? Your face? I was clearly mocking him. But God knows what he took it as. He glared back at me with shame and anger. Emma, don't think you can do whatever you want just because you have a bit of money. I will never yield to you. Forget about investing in me. I'll wait to see you regret this. Then he dashed out of the library. He had this strangely comical air of being disrespected. But heaven knows, I really just didn't want to spend money on him. David still managed to secure investment. I heard that Lily helped him get the funding, 5 million yuan for 51% of the shares in his newly established company. David became an instant celebrity at school. He was enrolled in the best teacher training program at the Normal University. But those courses were useless for his entrepreneurship. He never attended classes. When a teacher criticized him for not focusing on his studies, he retorted bluntly, asking how many years of the teacher's salary could match the 5 million yuan he had secured. After that, no one dared to bother him. I knew about David's startup project. He was smart. In his previous life, he entered the new energy vehicle industry, focusing on battery life issues. At that time, I liked him. So of course I thought he was full of talent. With my family's connections, I got him into the best renewable energy science and engineering program at the top university in the capital. He studied diligently for 4 years there. Then after starting graduate school, he co-founded a company with his mentor. But now, he was just a newly enrolled college freshman. Even if he had memories from his past life, he had been a CEO for years and long detached from the technological frontline. Could David, relying solely on his own R&D skills, succeed in entrepreneurship? I would wait and see. David put together a startup team. He tracked down all the people who worked with him in his past life. Unfortunately, only a few guys as inexperienced as he was fell for his pitch and joined him. As for his mentor from his past life, I heard he was rejected without even a meeting. Come on. The guy was a top-notch expert in the industry. Why would he pay attention to some poor student from another school with no connection? But I was different. Using my alumni connections, I happily collaborated with Professor Zhang with an initial investment of 30 million yuan. I even squeezed Chris in there. After all, he studied this field too. Getting into Professor Zhang's team early, being on track for a direct PhD program, how great! Chris hadn't been there long before he started sharing with me the complaints about David from the senior students. Like how David would give orders, I want all the competitors' data in 3 minutes. His senior labored over opening a data statistics website, clicking away frantically, only to get stuck at a point requiring a membership fee to continue. Then turning the computer screen to face David. David's towering arrogance higher than an 18-story building collapsed instantly when he saw the subscription fee, a whopping 300,000 yuan. For David, backed by the Williams family in his previous life, this would have been just a few lines of free background info. But this time, he had to personally experience how expensive fresh data was. Naturally, no membership was purchased. An hour later, David threw them a list of companies to investigate new products. But no matter how much they searched, The information was scarce, one company hadn't even been established. When the senior went to report back, David pointed his finger and scolded him for half an hour. The other guy said those companies are all industry giants. How could there be so little information? The pay is low and there's too much work. His senior couldn't stand it and had a big fight with David. Then directly quit. After returning, he complained about David to Chris and the others, saying he has no fate to be a tycoon but is riddled with all the bad habits of one. I privately thought this was a spot-on summary. David has always been extremely arrogant. Back then, everything went smoothly because I used the Williams family's resources to constantly prop him up. When he needed data, the Williams family's strategy department had annual subscriptions to all the major professional databases. When he needed plans, dozens of managers under him, each specialized in their own part, compiled everything together and handed it up for David to present. When he needed a tech breakthrough, dozens of key tech staff in the lab worked around the clock overtime to achieve patented results, all under David's name. It was these people who slowly bestowed the spotlight onto David, making him a tech genius and a rising business star. But he always thought it was him shining, lighting up others. To my misfortune, I was blind back then and truly believed he was an undiscovered gem. David's startup team didn't last long. Just as they were getting some results, someone with the core tech walked out. Of course, David said it was stolen. But actually, the person applied for a patent while David put his own name on it for the credit. That guy took the tech to a rich kid's company, earning 10 times what he did under David. David couldn't swallow it, stormed into the company to cause trouble, ended up in a fight with the rich kid, and they both ended up in the hospital. I got the news and hurriedly notified Lily to rush to the hospital together. In my previous life, that rich kid wasn't about to let David off easy. It cost me a huge price to bail him out. This time, well, let's just watch Lily perform. In the ward, David lay all alone on the bed, his leg in a cast and hoisted high. On the other side, the rich kid sat in a wheelchair, head wrapped in bandages, with several burly guys standing noisily behind him. David's face turned pale with fright. It was honestly scary, back when I alone blocked them outside the ward to negotiate in my previous life. I was pretty scared myself. But this time, it's much better. This time, I'm here to watch the show. When David saw me and Lily, he visibly relaxed. Especially when he saw me, an expression of smug superiority crossed his face. Like I knew this woman couldn't let me go. And even a hint of annoyance that we were late. It made me want to rush up and punch him twice. The rich kid noticed David's stare and turned to ask me, "You his girl?" I frantically waved my hands and backed away. "I'm just passing through." David glared at me furiously. Then seeing Lily beside him, a look of understanding flickered in his eyes, probably assuming I was jealous. I quickly backed off even farther to avoid catching the stupidity. The rich kid turned to Lily. Lily stepped forward. David's gaze immediately softened into tenderness, sparkling as he looked at her. Don't get the wrong idea. I'm just an ordinary classmate to him. And I think there's a misunderstanding between you all. Clear it up and it'll be fine. Lily turned sideways toward the rich kid, tucked her hair behind her ear, revealing her delicate jawline. Misunderstanding? I've got no misunderstanding. He cracked my head open, and I'm here to make him pay. The rich heir gave Lily a once-over with ill intent. Lily shyly lowered her head. The rich heir snorted coldly. What? You want to help him pay up? Lily paused, still acting weak and timid. Not exactly. Just wondering if you could go easy on him. Cut the amount. For my sake. The rich heir rubbed his chin. All right. Today, I was supposed to close a deal worth $1 billion. He smashed my head in. Ruined it all. So he should pay for everything. But since it's you, I'll give a 10% discount, Just make it 90 million. Pretty generous. Huh? He demanded an exorbitant price. Lily's expression shifted instantly. All her shyness gone. I don't know him well. Sort it out directly with him. She left the ward without a glance at David. The light in David's eyes visibly faded. With no one stepping up. The rich heir kept glaring fiercely at David. If I'm not satisfied with the payment, I'm throwing you in jail. It was like last time all over again. Both were hurt. But David threw the first punch. If the other side refused to settle, he'd definitely face criminal charges. David knew this well. Last time, I secretly traded the Williams family's most profitable business line to the rich heir. Not just protecting David but also retrieving his stolen core technology. This time, he had no money or power and still barged into the company alone, probably assuming I'd bail him out. Sure enough, David looked at me. Emma, just help me with this. And I'll be your boyfriend. He shut his eyes tight and turned away as if enduring the ultimate humiliation. Last time, I worried about his injuries and didn't want to pressure him. So I never said what it cost me. This time, I'd make him see exactly what he lost. I deliberately put on a lovesick act, pleading with the rich heir in a cheesy romantic tone. Tell me, what'll it take to let him go? Then someone with the rich heir recognized me, and his demands shot up instead. Oh, it's Emma. My bad for not spotting you sooner. We're practically family here. No need to talk crass money. If you want me to go easy on this pretty boy of yours, easy, hand over the Williams family's retail channels. The rich heir smirked at me. David opened his eyes and spun around abruptly. In his past life, he'd taken over the Williams family, so he knew exactly what those channels meant. I pretended to look hesitant. David's expression clearly began to soften. He must have recalled why. In the previous life, the retail channels of the Williams family were provided to others for free. It was all for him. In David's extremely touched gaze, I gave a mischievous smile. If it were really the gigolo I kept, I'd pay the money without hesitation. But some people can't recognize their own positions and have been tainted by others. I don't have the hobby of recycling trash. I rolled a huge disdainful eye at David and left the ward with an air of dominance. Well, it was really refreshing. David wasn't sent to jail. The rich kid didn't really want the money. What he wanted was the project in David's hands. David was forced to hand over his entire startup team to the rich kid. Even he himself signed a contract and became an employee under the rich kid. It said that he could only be considered an intern before graduation, getting a monthly subsidy of $1,000. When Lily found out, she immediately went to David to make a scene. The $5 million investment Lily gave him was raised from one of her rich boyfriends. Now, not only did she not see any returns, but she also lost all her principal. That boyfriend suspected that she and the gigolo had colluded to cheat him out of money and dumped her in a fit of anger. Naturally, Lily was furious and went to David. It said that they had several rounds of arguments. And finally, David compromised and signed an IOU for $5 million. With his current monthly subsidy of $1,000, he probably won't be able to pay it off in his next life. I laughed at Lily's stupidity in my heart. But soon, I couldn't laugh anymore. That shameless David actually turned his attention to me. Early in the morning, I left the dormitory to go to class. Just as I went downstairs, I saw David waiting at the door. He was holding a small transparent plastic bag in his hand, and there were 2 big steamed buns bought from the cafeteria in the bag. Emma. He saw me and ran over in big strides. Here. Your favorite big steamed buns. He handed me the buns and tossed his head, thinking he was being cool. I felt so disgusted that I almost threw up my overnight food. David wasn't stupid. Naturally, he saw my disgust. He frowned his thick black eyebrows and looked impatient. Don't like them? Didn't you used to? He stopped halfway through his sentence. Seeing his look of being afraid of slipping up, I sneered in my heart. Used to? Well, that was in the previous life. It was the time when he threw his dinner plate at me in the cafeteria, and I was terribly embarrassed. I endured it and didn't go to see him for a whole week. It said that he had a really tough time that week and finally couldn't stand it anymore. So he brought me breakfast. 2 cold big steamed buns. Now, I even suspect they were the leftovers from the day before. But at that time, I was so love-struck. My mind is completely blown that David bought me breakfast. David, personally, specifically, for me. I practically inhaled 2 dry steamed buns. Even when my stomach hurt for 3 days afterward, I kept happily trailing after David. Honestly, I want to travel back in time and slap my past self twice. I don't even like steamed buns. She doesn't like steamed buns. I turned around to find Chris standing behind me at some point. He held a pink thermal lunchbox in both hands, topped with a glass bottle of fresh milk. I told you there's no need to buy me breakfast every day, I said, feeling rather awkward. Skipping breakfast is bad for your stomach, Chris replied, handing me the milk. Once, he'd seen me during a stomachache episode, and I'd offhandedly mentioned it might be due to missing breakfast. Since then, he prepared varied breakfasts for me daily without fail, rain or shine. I accepted the milk. Perfectly warm. Surprisingly tasty. Seeing no one was paying him attention, David snorted coldly and turned to leave. Passing a trash bin, he deliberately slammed the buns against its side. Thud. They hit the ground. David didn't look back. No manners, I muttered. Wasting food isn't right, Chris said. He passed me the lunchbox, walked over, picked up the buns, removed the plastic bag, and placed them where students often fed stray cats. In that moment, he seemed to glow. David didn't give up. He always found ways to suddenly appear beside me, like an unshakable fly. When I attended class, he'd already saved a seat and waved enthusiastically from afar. I directly complained to the professor about someone disrupting my studies. When I ate at the cafeteria, he'd call me to cut the long line in front of him. I turned around and headed upstairs to the a la carte dining hall. On weekends when I went home, he'd wait downstairs, saying he wanted to walk with me. I handed my bag to my assistant and got into the waiting luxury car. His persistence wore me thin. Learning about it, Chris carved out more time to accompany me. His own course load was heavy. Plus he participated in the professor's research group. His free time was scarce. Yet around me, he remained utterly unhurried. Evenings after study sessions, we'd feed stray cats together near the dorm. The kittens were wary but greedy, breaking fish sausages into bits on my palm. The little cats approached, drawn by the scent. Their damp, soft tongues licking my palm sent tingling shivers through me, melting my heart. I caught myself feeling envious of a cat. Chris suddenly spoke, his voice almost inaudible. Tilting my head, I met his bright, moist eyes. I hadn't realized how close we were. Arm against arm, separated only by thin fabric. I could almost feel his body heat. A gentle breeze drifted by, carrying a green, woody fragrance. Not trees, Chris. Slightly tilting my head upward, I felt dizzily enchanted. What are you doing? A furious roar shattered the silence. David stood behind us, his face twisted with rage. The kittens were startled and scattered in all directions. David's eyes locked onto mine, looking like he wanted to tear me apart the next second. Chris stood up, stepping in front of me. I threw away the leftover Pollock sausage in my hand, stood up, clapped my hands, and walked out from behind Chris. What gives you the right to question me? I stared blankly. meeting David's eyes. I am. David's voice was hoarse, his throat seeming choked. His expression shifted from anger to confusion to regret, and finally revealed a hint of pain. You're mine, he insisted stubbornly, gazing at me as if I were the most precious treasure in the world. Unfortunately, I didn't believe it was true. Even if it were, it was too late now. I reined in my emotions and turned to face Chris. Go home early. Chris nodded. I'll watch you go up first. Okay. I turned and started up the stairs. David kept calling me from behind. I kept walking without ever looking back. David was like a muddy pit. In my past life, I had stepped into it, covered in mud, and ended up destroying myself and my family. This time, all I needed to do was walk around him. David never bothered me again. But Chris kept coming to see me as often as before. Breakfast together and evening walks to feed the cats became almost routine. Until one day, Chris didn't show up from morning till night. I felt uneasy inside and asked his senior. The senior also hadn't seen him in the lab and couldn't reach him to get some materials. I used my family connections to investigate and found out he had left school late last night and then went off the grid. Digging deeper, I discovered the last place he appeared was a dirty, messy alley. That area was Chris's home. I recalled his drunkard father and the bruises he had on his face the first time I met him. I hurriedly brought people to the place. The small, run-down house had walls so dark they looked burnt. A big man reeking of alcohol leaned against the wall, clutching a liquor bottle. When people arrived, he just raised a hand to block the sunlight streaming in and kept drinking. Where's Chris? I asked. The big man ignored me. One of the people I brought shook him a few times, and only then did he let out a drunken belch and slur. Someone took him away. Huh? That little brat thought he could hide by not coming back. But wouldn't you know it? Someone came looking so eagerly to have him pay off my debts. As the drunk staggered, holding his liquor bottle, something flashed through my mind too quickly to catch. Finally, someone stepped up and slapped him twice, making him cover his head and beg for mercy before giving the name of the loan shark. Biao. I rushed there with my people without stopping. When Brother Biao saw that I had a large group of people, he only agreed to let me bring one person in to talk to him. I agreed without hesitation. Chris was locked in an empty room. There was a table and a stool in the middle of the room. Chris was sitting on the stool, with his head pressed on the table, facing an IOU. There was blood on his face and body, but he still gritted his teeth and said nothing. The young man is quite tough. Brother Biao waved his hand, and his minions let go of Chris. Only then did Chris notice me. For a moment, his eyes were wide with anger. How did you get here? Chris tried to get up and come over, but was firmly held down. Don't be in a hurry, young man. I think your girlfriend is in good condition. Maybe she'll help you pay off your father's gambling debt. It'd be nice for you two to leave peacefully. Brother Biao walked over, picked up the IOU, and spread it out in front of me. Emma, judging from your outfit, I'm sure you don't care about this 1 million or so. If you help the young man pay it off, I'll respectfully see you out. How about that? I looked at the figure on the IOU. Over 1,200,000. I'll pay. I agreed without hesitation. Chris' eyes dimmed for a moment. Then he suddenly struggled violently. Bring the IOU here. I'll sign it. I'll sign it. Don't bother her. There was a hint of crying in Chris' voice. I felt quite sorry for him and just wanted to pay the money and take him away quickly. Then one of Brother Biao's minions whispered something in his ear, and Brother Biao's expression immediately changed. So you're Miss Williams. Pardon my rudeness. For this 1 million or so, if I let you go like this, people will say Brother Biao, look down on you. Brother Biao waved his hand, and someone handed him a new IOU. The amount was 100 million, with a daily interest rate of 1%. Brother Biao pointed to the signature area. Miss Williams, just sign here, and we can talk. This is just being too greedy. I pursed my lips and said nothing. Brother Biao's minions slowly surrounded me. The bodyguards I brought were on full alert. Just as the two sides were at a standstill, someone broke down the door. It was the police. I had told them to call the police before I entered the door. The speed of the police officers really didn't disappoint me. Brother Biao and his men were obviously panicked. Someone took out a gun in nervousness and pointed it at me. At the moment the gun went off, my mind went blank. It wasn't until the warm blood dripped onto my hand that I felt myself tightly wrapped in a warm embrace. It was Chris. Brother Biao was arrested. Chris was sent to the hospital. During the investigation, it was found that David had called Chris out in the middle of the night. Unfortunately, he insisted that he was just passing on a message from Chris' father. There was not enough evidence to convict him. David left the police station after giving a statement. But Chris and I both knew that he was definitely involved in this matter. During Chris' stay in the hospital, David came to visit him brazenly. Chris had an injury on his shoulder and was lying half sitting on the bed. I was feeding him bird's nest soup beside him. He was a bit shy at first. As soon as David walked in, he sucked onto the spoon I handed over, drank slowly, and signaled with his eyes that he wanted more. I was amused. David watched us with a gloomy and distorted expression. Emma, what's so great about him? A son of a gambler. Is he worth your doing this? Or do you just enjoy the pleasure of manipulating poor kids like puppets? David was already going a bit mad. In his words, he no longer hid the fact of his rebirth. But his accusations only made me laugh. Manipulating? In my past life. For his sake, I sacrificed the entire Williams family. And he calls that manipulating? But I was too lazy to argue with him anymore. David, you're not welcome here. Please leave. I directly gave the eviction order. Instead of turning around and leaving as he used to, David walked to my side, crouched down, and tried to grasp my hand. I avoided it. He seemed a bit angry but held back his temper. Emma, stop messing with me. Let's go back to how things were. You stay by my side, and I'll never treat you badly again. Okay? A hint of plea appeared in his expression. I deliberately smiled at him. Then, as a light gradually lit in his eyes, I softly said to him, I refuse. Just like in my past life, when I pleaded with him to spare the Williams family and my parents. He held Lily's hand and stepped on my hand, saying, I refuse. Chris recovered quickly. On the first day the doctor allowed him to be discharged. He reported back to the lab. My parents were frightened by the incident with Brother Biao, so I had to shuttle between school and home. Days were peaceful. Until one day, I noticed that my dad looked a bit downcast. When I asked, I learned that our family company, the Williams family, was facing trouble. Long-term cooperative customers were suddenly snatched away. When bidding, the reserve prices were always figured out by competitors. Even the retail channels that had always been a point of pride were frequently interfered with. The ones meddling were none other than the rich kids who'd fought with David. They kept poking here and there. Though it wasn't enough to seriously hurt the Williams family, it was annoying. My dad got tired of dealing with these small matters and dumped them on me. I knew clearly that all of this was David using his memories from his past life to stir trouble. But it's hard to find evidence for such things. So we had to start from the new energy project. After David's team was taken over by the rich kids team, things didn't go well for him. After hitting walls repeatedly, he remembered Professor Zhang, whom I was collaborating with. Secretly, he had been contacting Professor Zhang, but he didn't know that Professor Zhang often told me about him as a joke. When that didn't work, he started scheming about Chris's seniors. Chris told me it seemed like someone had a crush, but there was no actual action taken yet. I had originally planned to ask Professor Zhang to transfer that senior brother out of the project. For now, I asked Chris to keep an eye on that senior brother and avoid alerting anyone prematurely. The new energy project made rapid progress. Professor Zhang, along with the students, applied for patents under the name of Joint Research and Development. Just as the patent was granted, David sued Professor Zhang and our Williams family in court, accusing us of stealing their technology. The witness was that senior brother who had been bribed. Not only that, he also stirred up the issue online, attempting to harm the reputation of the Williams family by leveraging public opinion through social media. Emma, if you obediently come back to me, I'll withdraw the lawsuit. Before the trial, David looked at me with absolute confidence. How ridiculous. In my previous life, I devoted myself wholeheartedly to following him, yet he discarded me like trash. In this life, I suppress him at every turn, but he persists in pursuing me. You're dreaming. I sneered coldly and brushed past him. At the trial scene, David was full of arrogance. Holding various data comparisons, he forcefully argued they had developed the technology first. As for us, we only submitted 2 pieces of evidence. One was video footage showing the bribed senior brother secretly copying lab data and privately handing the data over to David. The other was a comparison of genuine core data, proving the data he copied out wasn't authentic at all. And David, presenting 2 completely different sets of data, accused us of plagiarism. The outcome was beyond doubt. Moreover, our lawyer filed a countersuit right there in court, charging David with unfair competition for directing others to steal data, false accusation for baseless claims of plagiarism, and damaging business reputation for spreading false information online. Multiple charges were established, and the case was filed on the spot. Though a verdict couldn't be announced immediately, David, he won't escape this. Before the verdict came down, David asked to meet with me one last time. I went. Chris also came, waiting for me nearby. David watched Chris departing and sneered. I didn't think you'd dare to fall for a poor guy. I knew he had realized I was reborn too. Betraying kindness and repaying it with evil is a character flaw, not about poverty. I no longer bothered to hide it. So you are reborn too? You're like me, we're the same kind, he said. David stared at me intensely. I was genuinely curious how thick-skinned he had to be to imagine I'd ever reconsider him. David, I said, rarely using his name. He looked over with hopeful eyes. I smiled. I wonder if you recall that you owe me for 5 million yuan. David's face stiffened. I couldn't be bothered with pretending to be civil any longer. Noticing my gaze, David straightened his back and lifted his chin even higher. In my previous life, it was my liking for you that always made you feel superior to me. It was my affection that let you climb on my shoulders and reach a place that was never rightfully yours. Yet you not only showed no gratitude, but you even looked down on me as some dirty ladder. If you despised me so much, you could have just told me. You enjoyed everything I gave while wishing to trample me into the mud. Being reborn this time, I haven't wronged you in the slightest. I simply took back what I once gave you. But look! I chuckled softly. This is where you should have stayed all along. David's expression turned ashen as he collapsed weakly. He could no longer maintain the pride I had cultivated with endless love and money. Chris came to pick me up. Without even glancing at David, his heart and eyes were filled only with me. He lowered his eyelashes, looking somewhat despondent. I'm a poor boy. I was just about to comfort him, but he raised his face and beamed a smile at me. I won't be one forever. He shook his phone at me. Inside lay a text message. Your new patent application has been approved.